In the 70s, the X-Men brand had sort of died. The comic was canceled, readers had moved on, but Marvel knew there was something there. The concept of superheroes with wildly different powers who are born with abilities, or at least the potential to have these abilities, but you know what I mean, and protect a world that hates and fears them. That's a great idea. It's an interesting concept, and more importantly, it's a gold mine. You can pull new characters out of thin air. They don't need origins that explain their powers, no vats of chemicals or government experiments. They're just there. It's genius. So Len Wein and David Cockrum wrote a comic called Giant Size X-Men. In it, Professor Xavier revealed that the original team of mutants, Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Angel, and Iceman, went on a mission and lost contact, with only a depowered Cyclops returning without any idea of who or what was responsible. To fix this, Professor Xavier brought together a new team of mutants from all over the globe, either characters who had been seen briefly in other stories or brand new heroes. They would go on to be some of the most popular X-Men and frankly Marvel and really most popular comic book characters of all time. And this issue would revitalize the title, turning it into one of Marvel's best-selling teams. So now that we've cast the original X-Men and the X-Men's greatest villains, we need to look at the Giant Size X-Men. 7 characters who would change the face of comics as we know it. And I will tell you now in this video, I'm not going to cast Wolverine. Yes, I know, but he's just too important, too popular, and his casting, it's too complicated. I'll explain what I plan to do at the end of this video. Also, instead of traditional highlight panels, since all of these characters were either introduced or reintroduced in this issue, Giant Size X-Men 1, I want to take a look at their introductions. How does this first issue frame these characters? Because honestly, they're all pretty dead on, which is so sort of incredible when you think about how much time has passed since then and now, and how strong of a foundation this laid. But without further ado, let's start with the Queen herself. Storm is a goddess. Here's my one problem with Storm. One I eventually got over, especially in the 90s, before everyone was an Omega level mutant. Storm just felt like she was better than all the other X-Men. Like, think about the first class. You got ice powers, punching, flying, laser punching, and mind reading / telekinesis. Then you got Storm. She could control the weather, the whole weather. We can't even predict the weather that well, and Storm could control it. And she joined the team at the same time as a guy who can heal really well. This all goes to say, Storm is special, and that is partially because of her mutant abilities, but also partially Storm was the daughter of a witch priestess, which isn't to say her powers are magical, but Storm's always been something special. She is a miracle, a goddess, way too good for these losers, and yet she fits in so well. Storm walks a very delicate balance. The biggest thing the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Storm needs is presence. She needs to feel like a deity. Every time she walks into a room with people who don't know her, they all go, ooh, that is somebody. Storm needs to have grace, elegance. She glides through the air like a leaf on the wind. So much of what Storm does is both incredible and effortless. At the same time, despite being one of the most powerful mutants on the team, Storm is also one of the more well-adjusted X-Men. Yeah, she's not perfect, but Storm has almost always been a loyal team member, a thoughtful and effective leader, and a good friend. Now she has one big issue. Because of an event that killed her family, Storm is claustrophobic. It plays out a lot like Wanda and Pietro's backstory in Age of Ultron. Her home was destroyed, her mom and dad were killed, and Storm was trapped. Because of this, Storm has occasional crippling panic attacks brought on by her claustrophobia. So it's not all just calm goddess Storm. Our actor needs to be able to switch on a dime to terrified. Also, Storm is African. Her mother was an African priestess, and her father was an African-American photographer. She was born in the United States, but lived a lot of her life in Africa. And she's got dark skin, which I have read a lot of Storm's black fans wish was represented more in the movies, so I've looked primarily at dark-skinned black women. Also, I think Storm should be on the taller side. She doesn't need to be like 6 feet tall, but I would like a Storm with stature, and this is coming from a short. I'm sure we can mess around with it, do some Lord of the Rings style trickery with perspective, or just give her those shoes that Robert Downey Jr. wore in that picture, but it would help if the actor is naturally tall. As far as age is concerned, I'm looking on the adult side, somewhere in their 30s. It's the best age you could possibly be. Mostly because even though the first class was kids, the giant-sized X-Men all seem to be recruited as adults. It's not super clear what their ages were, but they were at least over the age of 20. And outside of X-Men Apocalypse, I don't think you really see Storm depicted as a child as part of the X-Men. She is usually about the same age as Scott, and since my Scott is in his 30s, Storm should be too. But other than that, you guys know Storm. She's Storm, one of the most memorable X-Men and one of the most memorable Marvel comic characters of all time, for good reason. Storm's introduction is complicated. She is in Kenya, granting the weather wishes of her worshippers. The professor greets her with, "I am called Xavier, and I've come to make you an offer I pray you will not refuse." An offer? What have you to offer a goddess? You have a land, Aurora, and people who adore you. I offer you a world and people who may hate and fear you, but people who need you nonetheless. The world I offer is not beautiful, but it is real, and more real than the fantasy you're living now. You are no goddess, Aurora. You are a mutant, and you have responsibilities. Come with me, child. Taste the world outside. You may find its flavor bitter or surprisingly sweet. And that's Storm. When Professor X explains to her the responsibility that comes with being a mutant, she's on board. Previous versions, Halle Berry's Storm was okay. I think I preferred her in X-Men 1. She went through an interesting transformation, and this was before the internet, so people like me left the theater after X2 and asked each other, like, did she have an accent in the last one? We were all like, I don't remember. Maybe, and I don't think she had it in this one. But the accent feels like part of a larger issue. Storm stopped feeling special. She had the power of Storm and even led the X-Men in The Last Stand, but I never got the sense that X2 and Last Stand Storm were a big deal. Storm should not just feel like another member of the team. One thing I love about Storm in the comics is she always tends to be very eloquent. Storm seems to choose every word she uses with purpose, potentially because of her glorious upbringing as a queen/priestess/goddess. Storm needs to be thoughtful. Storm's speech should almost be like poetry. Then Alexandra Shipp. Listen, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I don't think we got enough of her in the movies she was in for me to have a really strong opinion one way or the other. I kind of think if they kept making these movies, I'd enjoy her, but she was never really the focal point of the story or had much of an arc. She spent a lot of time just standing around, so she might have been great. I'm not sure. The runners up. Could we bring Alexandra Shipp back? Well, okay, she's on the lighter skinned side, so probably not ideal based on that criteria I talked about before, but she was fine in X-Men Apocalypse. I legitimately don't know if she had more than 3 or 4 lines in Dark Phoenix. All of this goes to say, I don't think it's like worth going out of her way to bring her back for this role, but if she came back, I don't think it would be the end of the world, but I do think we could do something different. Michaela Cole is an interesting pick, and either she is already Storm or she cannot be. Cole has a part in Black Panther 2. I know next to nothing about Black Panther 2, so I have no idea who she's playing, but hey, Storm has quite a history with Wakanda, so I would not be shocked if we got introduced to Storm through Black Panther 2. But I'm not going to spend too much time on Cole, since the reality is she's probably got some other role that would preclude her from being Storm. I do think she'd kill it though. I understand why DeWanda Wise comes up in so many Storm fan casting lists. She's very talented. I watched some of She's Gotta Have It and that episode of the Twilight Zone reboot. I totally buy her as Storm. She's got a big part coming up in Jurassic World Dominion, so that may launch her into a new strata of star power. I likewise absolutely think she could do it. But let's go a little deeper. Sydelle Noel was already in Black Panther as one of the Dora Milaje. However, her character is not incredibly consequential. And if your reaction to that is to say, well, yes, she is, okay, then what's her name? Take a second and try to remember it. Just kidding. On IMDb, her name is just Dora Milaje. Now, I'm not trying to minimize her role here, only making the case that she could absolutely show up as Storm, and it wouldn't be a big continuity nightmare. At most, it would be one of those things that shows up in articles like, which MCU actor has played different characters? So, who cares? As I mentioned in my Nebula exclusive Casting the Mojoverse video, which you should totally watch, it's great, I'm a big fan of a show called Glow. It was a great show, ran for 3 seasons, and then was canceled abruptly, as is tradition on Netflix. The show is about a group of amateur wrestlers trying to create an all-female show, and Noelle played an out-of-work stunt actor who I really liked. I haven't seen her do an accent out of maybe one Dora Milaje line if she had it, but assuming she could do it, I would be very happy with Noelle as Storm. I've always appreciated an actor with experience in very physical roles, especially for someone like Storm who needs to have a big presence. Plus, a lot of her power involves waving her arms around and flying. But that's not the whole story though. In Glow, Noelle gets to flex some acting chops, so I think she could do it. Originally, I was a little hesitant about Anna Job, since she's already got a high-profile superhero role under her belt, which probably requires a big contract and time commitment, but the more I learn about Job, first of all, she's born in Senegal, so that's actually African. That'd be very cool. To be fair, she lived most of her life in the States, but Still, it's a good start. Second, Coriander, aka Starfire, is a Tamaranian princess working on a team of metahumans, so that's kind of already Storm. It's experience you're not really going to find anywhere else, so I think she's worth considering. Sky P. Marshall was a pick I wasn't super familiar with before I started working on the video. I've never watched Black Lightning, and I gave up on the Sabrina show before she showed up, but from the episodes I've watched since, I think she's really got a shot here. Spoilers for the chilling adventures of Sabrina. She plays a voodoo priestess who is actually someone else in disguise, but if you take the character as presented before the twist, the priestess has a very Storm vibe. She is powerful, regal, calm, elegant, friendly, and mysterious. Watch some of those clips on your own. I think you'll see Storm. The winner. I had not seen Anne Boleyn, although playing royalty is good experience. I also had not seen After Yang, although I did watch it in research for this video. It's very good. I had not seen most of her work, but I had heard her name in conversation a lot. So I turned on Queen and Slim, a movie a good friend had always told me to watch. And guys, Jodie Turner-Smith is my Storm. She is so interesting in that movie. Has such an unusual energy. She is both calm and terrified, in control, angry, but still vulnerable. Smith is exactly the type of movie star that Marvel would be lucky to snatch up and get involved in the MCU. Watch Queen and Slim. So that's Jodie Turner-Smith for Storm. Thunderbird is dead. That's right, we're doing everybody. One of the mutants recruited by Professor Xavier to save the original X-Men from Krakoa was John Proudstar, who went by the codename Thunderbird. He was an Apache mutant with enhanced strength, speed, senses, and I have always seen it written like this, sturdiness. John, after some goading, joined the team and stayed with the X-Men for, checks notes, one issue before he checks notes, exploded. That's right, John Proudstar died, and he didn't come back until very recently as a result of the Resurrection Protocol merging with Wanda's magic, but basically, John Proudstar is most known for being one of the few X-Men who stayed dead. So hey, is he essential here? Not really, but his death inspired the actions of his brother, James Proudstar, to seek revenge and ultimately join the X-Men. So let's talk about James. He sometimes goes by Thunderbird, but later takes on the name Warpath, and he's pretty much Thunderbird again. I would say John's main trait is his stubbornness. He does not follow orders incredibly well. It's what got him killed. And then when James found out about this, he swore revenge. So they both got hot tempers. And besides that, there really is not much to John. It's like how Landfill dies halfway through Beerfest and is replaced by his identical twin brother. There was a death, but the status quo remains unchanged. James has much more of a history. He joined the Hellions to get revenge on Xavier for leading John to his death. Then he has a change of heart and eventually joins the X-Force, where he stayed for a lot of his history. His powers make him an asset on that team. And what are his powers? Take a guess. It's the same as John, but better. Speed, strength, tracking, sturdiness. So I think we've got two options here. First is we play the story out the way it happens in the books. John joins, dies, James comes for revenge, goes good. It's an option, although I would argue a little convoluted. And either it happens over the course of one movie, in which case it would feel rushed, or it happens over multiple movies, in which case I don't think audiences would really care. The second option is the one I imagine Marvel will go with. John and James will be merged into one character named Thunderbird, who joins the X-Men very early like John did, and then just stays around like James did. None of the "you killed my brother" baggage, just an X-Men with a strong will, a good heart, and sturdiness. Thunderbird's introduction is... listen, it's tough. A lot of words get thrown around. John is in the middle of wrestling a bison to the ground when the professor stops him and explains that he needs John to use his mutant powers to help others. And John says, in so many words, "No, I don't owe you anything." When Professor X says that he is scared, in an effort to appeal to John's pride, John replies, "Ain't nobody that calls me a coward, mister. I'm as good as the next guy. Hell, I'm better. You give me a chance, I'll prove it." John is headstrong, maybe a little too much for his own good. Previous versions. Days of Future Past gave us a tiny bit of Warpath played by Boo Boo Stewart. He did not have much to do, so fine. We also got Thunderbird on the series The Gifted, which, listen, I didn't watch it. Maybe I'll go back one day, but for now, here's what I know. John was the leader of the mutant resistance. He was played by Blair Redford. People seem to like him. Like, whenever I mention Legion, everybody's like, "Oh, you gotta watch Legion. Legion's the best." That doesn't happen with The Gifted. I don't know what the story is with that show. My runners-up. So for runners-up 1 and 2, I don't think it's out of the question that we could keep Stu Stewart or Redford. Hell, keep them both and have them be the brothers they played originally. They were fine as those characters. Let's give them a real shot at a meteor role in a movie. But then beyond that, I have two actors who are both kind of tied in my eyes for Thunderbird. If they want to go young, I recommend Tefero Wunatai. This dude is the star of Reservation Dogs, an FX Hulu show about a bunch of kids growing up on a reservation. Real funny, some solid drama, very charming. Kid has range and a bright future. Thing is, he's like 20, so it's probably on the younger side considering my Storm's age. A lot of it depends on how the rest of these guys play out. And hey, if Thunderbird makes a start on another younger team like the New Mutants or Generation X, then Wunatai would be a great fit. And maybe he could play older, but if we are going with older, then the obvious choice for me is Martin Sensmeyer. He played Red Harvest in Magnificent Seven, has roles in 1883, Westworld, Yellowstone, bunch of shows. He's even going to play Jim Thorpe in a biopic. It feels like he's a rising star who would be perfect for the role of a slightly older Thunderbird. So for simplicity's sake, I'm going to say Martin Sensmeyer is my Thunderbird. Colossus is a big softie. Colossus should be the X-Men's Hulk or Thing. The heavy, bulletproof, super strong, able to punch a helicopter out of the sky. And while he does fill that role on the team, he isn't quite like those other two. Hulk is angry. Thing is a brawler. But Peter Rasputin is an artist. He will jump into a fight to defend another mutant, and he gets angry from time to time, but Colossus does not enjoy it like those other two do. He is peaceful, quiet, sensitive. Maybe that's because Colossus is so strong, able to fight the Hulk or Gladiator. And even before that, he was a big guy, so Peter doesn't have anything to prove. Maybe it has to do with him growing up in a nation defined by stoicism. It more than likely comes from Colossus's family. His mother and father were humble farmers, and his brother Mikhail was a cosmonaut who died in action, it appeared, when Peter was young. The grief of losing his brother triggered the X gene that gave Peter his superhuman abilities, and Colossus worried, rightfully so, that the Russian FSS would seek him out and use him as a weapon, so Peter kept a low profile. He did not turn into a superhero, he did not start fights or try to get attention. Then his little sister Ilyana was born, and Peter had even more to protect, even more reason to stay out of trouble. But like I said, when push comes to shove, Colossus will do anything to protect those closest to him. He fought the Russian military when he was discovered, he joined the X-Men to protect the world and his family from evil mutants, and he even made the ultimate sacrifice to save mutant kind from the legacy virus that had killed his sister. Don't worry, they both got better. That is the most important thing an actor playing Colossus needs to be able to get right. Sweetness. Colossus is a lover, not a fighter. He loves his friends, family, and all of mutant kind, and will do whatever is necessary to keep them safe. But in a perfect world, Colossus would not be a superhero. He would be a painter. That's right, Colossus loves to paint. It's all he does these days. Peter appreciates the beauty in nature, in the world. He enjoys a peaceful day more than anything else. Colossus is also a great friend with many close friendships within the X-Men. Cyclops taught him how to fight, Storm and Colossus were fast friends when they both joined the team, and of course, Wolverine and Colossus created the most famous combo move in comics, the Fastball Special, which I have to assume they are saving for Colossus in the MCU. Otherwise, why did they think up this amazing move from Endgame and then not put it in the movie? Come on. Colossus is also part of one of the most consistently inconsistent X-Men relationships. He and Kitty Pryde have had an on-again, off-again love affair that always seems to end in tragedy, but the affection for one another remains strong. Peter's also fallen for Zaji, the Secret Wars healer, Rogue, Callisto, and Domino. He's got a big heart. Also, obviously, Peter's a big boy. He's at least 6 foot before the transformation, and somehow he grows a whole nother foot when he armors up. Colossus needs to be the biggest member of the team by a lot, at least until Strong Guy shows up. Besides that, it's pretty straightforward. Colossus is tough, kind, thoughtful, and dependable. The ultimate X-Men big brother. Colossus's introduction is the classic tractor careening out of control towards Ilyana, and Colossus has to armor up to stop it, therefore raising his profile dramatically. The professor, who just happens to be there, approaches and gives the usual pitch. Peter says, "You want me to go with you to America? But if I possess such power as you say, does it not belong to the state?" This is a comic written in 1975. Charles says, "Power such as yours belongs to the world, to be used for the good of all. And believe me, your powers are needed." Peter talks with his parents and is ultimately convinced. Says, "My heart tells me to stay, Papa, but my conscience tells me otherwise. I must go, Papa." For Colossus, it's all about responsibility and using his gifts to help the world. You can see why he and Storm get along so well. They're swayed by pretty much the same argument. previous versions. Alright, we start with Daniel Cudmore, and first of all, this scene in X2 rules. Colossus walks into the room, armors up, takes some bullets, and just tosses those guys through the wall. It looked amazing, sounded amazing. It somehow looked maybe worse in The Last Stand, and everything in that movie looked worse, like the script. It took me a while to figure out exactly what it was. I really like the hair in X2, how it stayed black, creates good contrast. But then in X3, in Days of Future Past, the whole character is chrome. It's a small thing, but it does really bug me. Also, not to nitpick, not unlike my podcast mostly nitpicking, the opening of Last Stand, it's bad. It doesn't make any sense. Storm is angry because the X-Men aren't working as a team, but that is all they're doing. They're sharing powers, helping each other. Even the fastball special, it's the ultimate team move. What else does Storm want? It's not like Wolverine is like charging in by himself and she's like, you should work with these young kids. He's like, I don't need to. I'm so mad about Jean. And that's not what it is. That would make sense, but that's not what happens. Also, I did not recognize until now that this kid in X1 next to the pool is supposed to be Colossus, which makes sense because Colossus loves to draw and this guy's around the right age and build, so that's a neat inclusion. Overall, I thought the Colossus from Gen 1 was fine. He didn't have a huge personality, but that does kind of gel with the character. He is very internal. He is a dependable member of the team who absolutely looks like he's stealing that television. Then we get Deadpool's Stefan Kapisek, and this Colossus was very good, like a really solid version of the character. They managed to nail the toughness and the kindness. He's also sort of an older brother to Negasonic. They have the relationship I would imagine he has with Magic. I love the line about how breakfast is the most important meal of the day and he gives us a protein bar, and the exploding mansion building character it's a great line. Also, the look of the character, great. Love the lines on the body, love the pointy darker hair. He is big, it's fantastic. I love what they did with his knuckles. And I love how Colossus's knuckles are really like defined. I think that's such a nice touch. The winners. First, we can absolutely keep Stefan Kapisek. I was initially a little hesitant since I didn't know what he looks like outside of his metal form. It's only voice work, so does his appearance match Colossus? Absolutely, 100%. He's even tall. Kapisek works so well, so why not just keep him? And some of you may wonder, well wait, Marvel is making a Deadpool 3. What happens when he crosses over with the MCU? Is it still the same Colossus? Well, yes and no. I could totally see a scene where Deadpool falls through a portal or something and then runs into Colossus and says, oh my gosh, Colossus, I never thought I would be so happy to see you. And Colossus says, I don't know who you are. Is this that Spider-Man? Deadpool says, what are you talking about? Remember? We stopped Ajax and then we did the sequel, made a lot of money, 750 mil, more than half international. And Colossus says, listen, little red man, I have no idea who you are. And Deadpool realizes, oh no, the mouse retconned you too? That mother language. Yeah, I know, one F-bomb. One of these days, I'm gonna do that kiss from Wally and you'll remember everything. But let's say this is a fresh start. I would recommend Danila Kozlovsky. This dude is the spitting image of Colossus. He's got the look. Listen, it's not rocket science. He played Prince Oleg on Vikings, and that character has more than enough range emotionally to cover Colossus. I'm not saying he's an easy character to play, but so much of Colossus is stature and peace. I think he could do it. Either way, it should be Kapisek's role to lose. He is my Colossus. Banshee is... Banshee is a guy. Banshee is a guy. Hush, sweetie. Banshee is a guy. Banshee is handsome. Sweetheart, what is it? Daddy's trying to talk to everybody about Banshee. Banshee is nice. Banshee is handsome. Banshee is Irish. You know what? Let's go with that. Banshee is Irish. Listen, I love Banshee. I love all of the X-Men except for the ones I don't. Looking at you, Wolfsbane. You know what you did. But Banshee is great. He is a main player in one of my favorite X-Men comics, Generation X. But as far as I could tell, he really wasn't anything extraordinary. He's a decent leader, but not better than Cyclops. He's a hunk, but not hunkier than Angel. He's got a complicated family life, but not more complicated than the Professor, or Jean, or Rogue, or pretty much anybody else. I think his role is the most flexible on the team. Banshee can play a lot of positions. And honestly, I was only half joking about the Irish thing. Sean Cassidy is very Irish. He owns Cassidy's Keep, a castle. His daughter is possessed by an Irish ghost spirit thing, or she becomes one. I honestly can't remember. And to be real, if we can only pick 6 of these mutants for an X-Men movie, Banshee is the one I cut, especially because I don't think the X-Men is where Banshee shines. To me, Banshee is most interesting when he is either teaching students or dealing with Cassidy family nonsense. So I think that means either we need an older Banshee who's seen it all and feels comfortable being a role model, or maybe one who is growing up with an evil brother, I guess. You know what? Banshee is loud. He is confident, boisterous, he's got a big personality, and obviously he has the power to create a sonic scream that he can also use to fly, so that's pretty loud. And it's funny because he needs to scream to fly, so you get scenes like this. And the costume is loud. Those wings, those colors, the stripes, it's all very extra in a way that fits with Sean's demeanor. Banshee's introduction in Giant Size X-Men is a perfect example of why I think Banshee is the least defined member of this team. Professor X meets Sean in the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee. Sean says, "Begorra, 'tis Professor X himself now. Banshee, I must talk with you." Skip the whole conversation, follow it with, "Shortly in the Banshee shabby headquarters." "So that's the story, is it? Then sure, and I'll help you, Professor. 'Twill be nice to tread the straight and narrow for a change." And that's it. All Banshee needs is to be asked. Previous versions. There are 2 versions here, so let's start with the first one chronologically, one I was not aware of until this week. In 1996, there was a movie. It was really the pilot for a series of TV movies, but altogether it's one story told over 90 minutes, so feature-length movie, and it is awful. You see, Fox made this movie based off the Generation X comics of the same name. The comic is about a new class of teenagers who are brought to the X-Mansion to learn to control their powers and work together as a team. The film centers around the same basic conflict with some bizarre changes. Like instead of Chamber, you've got this weird Cyclops ripoff. Instead of Husk, you have just a strong girl, which is strange because that's already just one of M's powers, so it's pretty redundant. Also, Jubilee was played by a white girl. Absolutely insane. And I'm not even getting to the villain. Maybe I'll make a video about it someday. But the series does feature as the teachers, Emma Frost and Banshee. And honestly, I didn't mind either of them. It's probably better Emma Frost than January Jones. And the Banshee, played by Jeremy Ratchford, he's fine. Pretty nice guy, understanding to the kids, does not look at all like Banshee, but it does make sense when you factor in that Ratchford also played Banshee on the animated series, so solid bit of casting. And then we've got Caleb Landry Jones in X-Men First Class. I think Jones is a very talented actor. Obviously, just watch 3 Billboards or Get Out, he is good. And I enjoyed him in the movie, but I'm not convinced he was an incredible Banshee. He wasn't hunky, he wasn't confident, and yes, I know, origin, but I just don't think I've ever seen Banshee portrayed that way before. If I didn't know what his powers were, I doubt I'd peg that character as Banshee at all. I could see him as maybe Madrix or Chamber. I think his energy is a bit more reserved, internal, quiet, and Banshee is loud. So even though I think he would still fit age-wise, I'm not so hot on bringing Jones back. Runners up. We are lousy with Banshees these days. I have 2 I really like, but here are the honorable mentions. I'm not gonna spend any time on these guys because they're all from Irish movies and TV and I'm not familiar with any of them. But they look the part, and honestly, I really like the 2 that I picked as the winners. One could even be Sean's brother, Black Tom, if they wanted. So let's roll these Irish names. You got Frank Blake, Donald O'Hally. Oh gosh, all right, I am Irish, so I'm half Irish, so I should be able to say these names. Donald O'Hally, Finn O'Shea, Rory Keenan, Colin O'Donoghue, Alan Leach, Jack Rayner, Aidan Turner. All those guys could probably play Banshee. The winners. So let's say we want the Giant Size X-Men to be on the young side. Then I think the Lost Daughters Paul Mescal would be the right pick. If you see him in that movie, watch interviews with him, he is the spitting image of a young Banshee. He's got everything you want from that character. But let's talk about Sam Eughan. And this guy, that's your Banshee. It's perfect. Yes, he's a bit older, in his 40s, but if they go the Generation X route and start with Banshee as a teacher, I think he's the perfect age. And he's already a star, plays Jamie on Outlander, and was even in Bloodshot, the perfect movie. I would love to see him paired with my Emma Frost, Vanessa Kirby, leading a team of young mutants in a Generation X series. But you may be wondering, wait a second, isn't Sam Ewan Scottish and not Irish? To be honest, I don't know where I got it in my head that he was Irish and not Scottish. He's very Scottish. The show he is on takes place in Scotland, but then more than that, that is just where the actor is from. Now, were it not for my Doom casting, I do think you could fit Jamie Dornan into this spot, but I still really like Sam Ewan here. If he could manage to swing the Irish accent, I think he has everything else you need. He's the right age for my Generation X Sean, a plenty of experience, he's handsome, he's kind of known in the States, so I am going to stick with it. Nightcrawler is a saint, the fuzzy blue elf, Kurt Wagner. You know, in the Munich circus, he was known as the Incredible Nightcrawler.
Save it. Storm.
We're out of here.
I love Nightcrawler a lot. If you, like me, grew up watching X-Men Evolution, you knew Kurt was the star. He was carefree, silly, a lot like Teen Titans Beast Boy. Was that a faithful interpretation of the character? Yeah, sure, kind of. It didn't get everything that's interesting about Kurt in the comics, but it functioned as a gateway for fans. We got to know a character with so much going on. One who was charming, sweet, and complicated. Kurt is very different from the rest of his X-Friends. He's the first X-Men in the comics who could not pass as human. While everyone else's introduction involves them either living comfortably or even being worshipped, Kurt is being run out of town by an angry mob. But he, more than any of the other giant-sized, wants to be accepted. He is not a monster, he's just a guy. A nice, lovable, sweet guy with a big heart who no one will accept until the X-Men. Now, Kurt has had a long and interesting tenure on the team. He's gone from fighting alongside the X-Men to being one of their leaders, to being one of the leaders of Excalibur, to going to heaven and then coming back again. There are so many places Kurt could work in these movies. I'd say there's even room for a Kurt solo movie or series. Just his origin alone is bonkers. Mystique is his mother, but she tossed him off a cliff when she was found by her village, and even that is sometimes different. Sometimes it was an accident, and sometimes he was caught and raised by Azazel, but then he went to live in the circus, and then sometimes he got chased out of the circus, and then he went to live with a nice priest, and the nice priest taught him about Catholicism, and then the church people came back and tried to kill him, and that's when he ended up with the X-Men. And also Azazel is maybe the devil, and that's his dad, and that's part of it, although I was never a big fan of the Azazel thing. I enjoy the Mystique connection, but we can get rid of Azazel. It doesn't matter. We don't have to get into all of that now, but Kurt has an interesting backstory. The most important thing for me about Kurt is that he is the best friend of a lot of X-Men, specifically Kitty, my favorite X-Men, or at least like one of my top 5. Our Nightcrawler needs to be warm. He needs to be the X-Men that when someone joins the team, you go, well, obviously they're gonna like Kurt. Everybody likes Kurt. He's also a swashbuckler. Kurt enjoys being an X-Man, getting into acrobatic sword fights, all while fostering a jaunty banter. He's also a prankster. So we need an actor who can have fun. Kurt has been described as the soul of the X-Men, and I think that's actually reasonable. After all, he is sort of the thesis of the team. Reverend Stryker points at Kurt and yells, "Human? You dare call that thing human?" And Kitty replies, "More human than you." It's my favorite line in all of comics. Humanity and your inherent value to society. It's not about how you were born, it's what you do. Kurt loves, Stryker hates. Who is more human? And despite this terrible run-in with a genocidal reverend, Kurt is also religious, more so than almost any other X-Men. He's even become a Catholic priest, although that was retconned kind of, but maybe not, I'm not sure. And that often creates an interesting conflict with his heroic duties. And when all the kids on Krakoa are killing each other because they could easily be resurrected, Kurt's the only one who has a problem with that. So much of a problem that he creates a mutant religion. Our actor needs to feel both spiritual and conflicted. And on top of all of that, Kurt has one of the most exciting character designs in all of X media. Yes, he's one of like 50 blue mutants, but he continues to stand out as the most fun. His sharp teeth, pointy ears, and devil tail give you something immediate to latch onto. He's a demon, but then it goes deeper. He has 3 fingers, blue fur, yellow eyes. He is alien in a way that's so unusual that it's almost familiar. He's not your average demon. That's Azazel. He's more complicated than that, something completely new. And on top of that, my favorite Nightcrawler design choice, even though Kurt has blue fur, he is traditionally drawn with black hair, just like Colossus. I love that contrast. Humanizes Kurt, and also just looks great with the dark blue fur. And we can't deny it's one of the most fun costumes in all of X media. Kurt is the first mutant we meet in the book, who's being chased out of town by an angry mob. They yell, "This way, men, the monster went this way." Kurt says to himself, "Monster, is it? The fools. It is they who are the monsters. They with their mindless prejudices. Perhaps things would be simpler, safer, if I had stayed with Jean Marcotte. But the life of a carnival freak is not for me, not for Kurt Wagner. Let them come, if they must. Let them try to kill me. At least if I die, it will be as a man." Then the professor saves Kurt with his mind stop at the last minute before the townspeople beat Kurt to death, and Charles offers Kurt a place on the team. All Kurt asks is, "Can you help me be normal?" The professor says, "After tonight's misfortune, Kurt, would you truly want to be?" Kurt says, "Perhaps not. I want only to be a whole Kurt Wagner. If you can make me that, teacher, I will go with you. Previous versions. X2 is my favorite one of these, and I think it did nearly everything right with Kurt. Alan Cumming was so great, what a weird pick for Nightcrawler, and yet so fun. And the decision to start the movie with a big, crazy Nightcrawler action scene where he went absolutely wild, but then you pull back immediately and reveal that he was under mind control, it's a great way to let us have our cake and eat it too. We got one great action scene, and then a very kind, peaceful character. That's if you don't count the video game where there's some fight scenes there, but like, not gonna mention that. They even got the religious aspect of Kurt right, and they managed to work it into the central themes of the movie. Man, that movie is good. And his costume is pretty weird, but hey, it's memorable. I think makeup made sense then as the way to go. It worked really well before in these movies, but honestly, if they can do this with CGI, just gives the actors a break. The process seems like a nightmare, and a lot of the time we don't notice that kind of CGI anyway. I don't know, I guess I'm open to it. Cody Smith-McPhee was also pretty good in the second generation of X-Men movies. He had a solid amount of personality, played it very shy and awkward, which is a choice. I don't think he ever really got time to form any meaningful relationships with other members of the team, which is where Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix really lost me. But in a vacuum, his performance was good, I liked the character, I appreciated the accent, and he had a great costume for all of like 10 seconds at the end of Apocalypse. The winner. I think we have two options here. And like a few of these, it all hinges on age. If we want a Nightcrawler in his 20s, I think we could bring Cody Smith-McPhee back. The kid is now a megastar. His role in Power of the Dog got him an Academy Award nom and a Golden Globe win. He is strange, he's quiet, and is already able to pull off the look, so why not? And I don't think that many people remember he was even in that movie, so audiences would be fine with it. But if we want a slightly older Nightcrawler, I have 6 syllables for you. Matthias Schweinhofer. Matthias was the breakout star of Army of the Dead and took that role to the next level in Army of Thieves. He is timid, sweet, and very German. Also, even though he's in his 40s, I think we could easily make the character CG like Professor Hulk and just age him down a bit to his late 20s, early 30s. Either way, Schweinhofer is a solid Kurt. Sunfire is a powerhouse. Shiro Yoshida is an interesting one. Here's his deal if you are not familiar. He was originally a villain whose mother died from radiation poisoning brought on from the long-term effects of America's dropping an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. That made Shiro very angry, and rightfully so. Regardless of what Marvel's Eternals would want you to believe, it was 100% the fault of the United States government and should go down as one of the all-time atrocities in modern history, and we don't talk about it nearly enough. They were people, civilians, just living their lives, and they all got incinerated. 200,000 people. It is unconscionable. And that isn't even counting the hundreds of thousands of Japanese citizens killed in strategic fire bombings, many just living in urban areas. Look it up, it's disgraceful. So you can understand why Shiro is angry. And when manipulated by his uncle, Tomo, Shiro used his incredible mutant power to create superheated plasma and waged a one-man war against America as Sunfire. But when Tomo killed Shiro's father, Shiro realized he was being used and gave up his crusade. Shiro is passionate because unlike many of the other giant-sized X-Men, he has a calling that is bigger than himself. Like, compare this to Nightcrawler, an important calling, but no sort of like heroic destiny. Shiro is the sole superhero charged with protecting all of Japan, a country that in the decades since he was born has seen an incredible amount of suffering. In fact, in my eyes, the mutant that Shiro feels the most similar to is Magneto. His powers come from witnessing the suffering of his friends and family at the result of a world war they had nothing to do with. The circumstances are obviously very different from Magneto's, but the basic motivation is pretty close. Personality-wise, Shiro is all over the place. He can get pretty moody, but he's a straight shooter, which means he's sort of rude, but he's also very humble. So humble that he tells us how humble he is, which leads to Shiro bumping heads with many of the X-Men, and he can back those words up because, and I haven't talked about it that much, he is very powerful. Like, in my opinion, easily the strongest member of these 7. And yes, he can't terraform a planet like Storm, but if we're just in a who can kill the most Sentinels contest, Shiro should win by a mile. He can fly and heat plasma to 1,000,000 degrees and then fire that plasma into a 1,000,000-degree blast. For reference, lightning is around 50,000 degrees. Shiro is a big deal and he knows it. I do want to mention that I don't see his origin being tied to Hiroshima being that big of a deal in terms of scaling time, not like it is with Magneto, since Shiro did not experience Hiroshima firsthand. His mother did, so I think we can still tie Sunfire to to that event. Just make his grandmother a survivor of World War II who lives an agonizing life because of radiation poisoning. Maybe even have that be passed down to Shiro's mom somehow. So Shiro's entire family has been devastated by America bombing Hiroshima. Same result. Or he can just live longer because of mutant powers. I don't really care. Shiro gets a very short introduction. The professor says, "I know your feelings toward the Western world, Shiro, and I would not have come to you." Shiro interrupts him. "But you require help that only I may give. So, I owe you nothing, Professor. But perhaps I owe something to myself. Perhaps it is time once more for the world to hear from Sunfire." Which means between these two panels, he got dressed for this little reveal moment, which is very theatrical for Sunfire. But it is a great example of his character. He will do what is needed, but Shiro does not owe anybody anything. He's proud, but Shiro is doing this because he believes it's the right thing to do. Previous versions. For reasons I do not truly understand, outside of general Hollywood racism, Sunfire has never appeared in live action. In fact, he's barely made it into the animated material, which sure, neither did Thunderbird, but Thunderbird immediately died. Sunfire has been around in the comics for quite a while. He has been on the X-Men, Avengers, X-Force, and even was the person responsible for Big Hero 6, and yet, no respect. It's a tragedy. The winners. We need moody Japanese actors. I have two I really like, a younger one and an older one, with a couple of others. Let's say we go young. I've been told for a while to check out a show called Alice in Borderlands, and it does have a lot of young talent. Depending on what direction they decide to take Shiro, I think you could have any of these three actors play him. I could see the show's star, Kento Yamazaki, who plays Roche Arisu, taking on the role of Shiro. I could also see Keita Machida, who plays Dakiche Karube, Arisu's best friend. He has made an impression on me as someone who could project Shiro's confidence. I'm trying so hard with these names. I looked them up. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing them correctly. But then you've got my pick for young Shiro, Dori Sakurada, who plays Suguri Nagari. In my opinion, he is the most dynamic member of the cast, with a strong penchant for overacting, but I think Shiro needs to be able to back up his sometimes cold demeanor with big emotional outbursts. Plus, as time goes on, Shiro becomes sort of a mess. He loses his powers, he gets drunk in the streets, so I think Sakurada could play all sides of Shiro. But if we want to go a bit older, my pick has to be Andrew Koji. Granted, he's barely older than Sakurada, and maybe it's just the beard, but I think Sakurada has a baby face and Koji looks older. I love him in Warrior, and I think he was pretty good in Snake Eyes. The movie was a mess, but he was solid. And his character, Tommy, who is almost kind of named Storm Shadow at the end, when you get to like the almost post-credit scene, he's like, I'm finally the guy I should have been when this movie started. Anyway, but Storm Shadow is very much Shiro. He's dedicated to his family, serious, stoic, but every so often he's able to open up and be vulnerable. Couple that with Asam's attitude from Warrior and his ego, and you've got yourself a Shiro. So, those are the first six: Storm, Thunderbird, Colossus, Banshee, Nightcrawler, and Sunfire. But the seventh member of the team, Wolverine. What about him? Well, what I have decided to do is give Wolvie his own video. Frankly, his portion was getting way too long, and I didn't want him to draw focus from these guys, who I also love. And the method I'm using for him is a bit different from these other six. After all, this is Wolverine. Hugh Jackman played this character for 17 years, for more than half of my life. No one even comes close. That legacy cannot be ignored, and this will be the single biggest piece of casting that comes out of the MCU for the rest of its existence. So it's less of an actor and more of a partner. I'm looking for a connection, to form a bond. That's why this next video will be the first and only episode of The Wolverachelor. Nah. Ooh, The Bachelorine. Oh yeah, that one's better. But if you need some more casting right now, and you've seen my other two videos on the topic, well, fear not. There is a secret fourth video that was originally just a joke, but then I made it, and it's actually got some of my favorite casting in the series, and that is my Mojoverse X-Men characters video, which you can only find on Nebula. You guys must know by now, Nebula is a subscription streaming service that I helped to create. It is my baby, and I release all my videos on that platform ad-free, sometimes with bonus content, and sometimes I put out full bonus videos. And this Mojoverse casting video is great. I cast Mojo, Longshot, Spiral, and Shatterstar. So if you want to get involved, you should definitely sign up for Nebula. And the best part is we've partnered with this video sponsor, CuriosityStream, for a bundle that gets you a year of Curiosity Stream and Nebula for $15. That's not $15 a month. That is $15 for the whole year. And Curiosity Stream, frankly, is fantastic. They have so many different documentaries on things like swords and squirrels. Or you could watch Wild Wolverine. Want to learn about Wolverines? Because they're real, which when Hugh Jackman got the role of Wolverine, he didn't know they were real things. So if you want to know more about Wolverines than Hugh Jackman did 25 years ago, watch Wild Wolverine. So if you want to get access to Curiosity Stream and Nebula, go to curiositystream.com/Nando. And to let me know on Twitter what you think of my Mojoverse casting. Thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are so fantastic. This video could not be made without you. None of these videos could. And thank you to everyone who listens to the podcast, mostly Nitpicking, and everyone who follows me on Twitter and Twitch, where I've been doing these drawings. I'm Nando View Movies on both of those platforms. See you next time for The Bachelorine.